Founders Forum, episode 14.
Open your mind to a new episode of the Founders Forum, the podcast championing a free economy, sound assets, and blockchain solutions. Each week, your hosts, entrepreneur Cole Snell and economist Bob Murphy, interview pioneers and free thinkers to help you develop into the architect of your future.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Founders Forum. Today, Cole and I are going to be speaking with Dr. Keith Smith, who is a board-certified anesthesiologist, but we're not going to be talking about his medical expertise per se. Instead, it's a broader topic. We're mostly going to be talking about the Surgery Center of Oklahoma, which Keith founded. And let me just read a little bit about the SCO, Surgery Center of Oklahoma. It's a 32,500 square foot state-of-the-art multi-specialty facility in Oklahoma City, owned and operated by approximately 40 of the top surgeons and anesthesiologists in central Oklahoma. The facility has been accredited by the AAAHC since 1998 without interruption. It has annually provided care to thousands of patients. And so the magic of this center is that they just take cash payments. They don't deal with insurance companies. They don't take government payments. And that allows them to deliver tremendous value, excellent medical care at a fraction of the typical cost. And when I say fraction, I mean, well, I'll let Keith explain, but we're talking like 10% of what the bill would be at a typical hospital for a comparable procedure. And so that's a huge savings. In particular, if you are an employer, listen up, because we're going to deal with that at some point. And you might say, well, gee, I'm not anywhere near Oklahoma. Just keep your ears perked, because Keith's going to talk about how the savings are so tremendous for certain procedures that he's got relationships with employers all over the country, and they make arrangements to fly their employees, including an escort, companion, to Oklahoma to have the surgery, even put them up in a hotel afterwards for recovery if necessary, then fly them back, and they still save thousands of dollars. And they have a track record. They know that the person's not going to need to go back because they didn't do it right the first time. So this is very interesting just to hear how it works. But like I say, if you are a founder or a business owner, we try to tailor the conversation to make sure it provided something that you might actually take into account when you make your decisions with your employees going forward. So without further ado, here is our conversation with Dr. Keith Smith. Well, Keith, welcome to the Founders Forum podcast.
Thank you guys for having me.
So Keith, I want to just grab the attention of the listeners who may not be familiar with what you're doing over there at the Surgery Center of Oklahoma. Just, can you give us an idea of some of the cost savings of typical procedures, just so they realize what a big deal this is and how much money we're talking about?
Sure. Yeah, when we first opened in 1997, we suspected that we could do better work for less. We didn't have any idea the spread was going to be what it was. Early on, it turned out to be about 10 to 1. And what I mean by that is if we charge $3,000 for a surgery, the not-for-profit hospital down the street was charging $30,000 for the same thing. I would argue at a lesser quality. So that ratio is proven to be true over time. It's 10 to 1 in areas far from me. That ratio, fortunately, is shrinking in areas close to me where we more directly compete with health systems that are abusive price gougers. They've had to respond to our pricing or lose business. But in areas like Alaska, Wisconsin, 10 to 1, New York, 10 to 1 compared to our online price is still pretty much the rule.
It is funny you say online pricing, because that's one of the innovations, right? That you actually tell the customer, the potential customer, here's what we would charge you for this procedure, where, in any other area, that's pretty standard. But in healthcare, that's not the case. I know calling for a pregnancy, I heard an NPR story where the reporter, she was pregnant and she called around to a bunch of the places. I'm making these numbers up, but this was the spirit of it. It was like she called 10 places and said just a regular, vaginal delivery, blah, blah, blah. How much would that be? 9 of them refused to give an answer, and one told her a number and said, but that's not a quote. It could be more. You know what I mean? Like, they just were deathly afraid of saying numbers.
That's right. Yeah, well, in 2009, I launched a website with our all-inclusive price list, what a friend of mine calls cash out the door. So when you pay that, you're never going to receive another bill. And not long after that, I launched another website at atlasbillingcompany.com. And that's where I post prices at inpatient hospitals where I negotiate pricing with them. And maternity is on there. An uncomplicated vaginal delivery with a 2-day hospital stay, including anesthesia and the newborn nursery, is about $10,000. So if you're going into it and you don't really know what you're going to pay, then it's going to be a lot. One of the reasons I posted the prices so people would know was to start a price war where someone could walk into their local hospital and say, I'm going to go to Oklahoma City and have my gallbladder removed for $5,865 all in. I need you to match this or we're headed that way. And it worked. I've had lots of correspondence with people. One fellow from Georgia, you and I had this conversation the last time we talked. He was quoted $40,000 for a procedure we had listed on our website for $4,000. He was from outside of Atlanta, and they matched my price because they had lost a patient to us for the same reason 2 months earlier. And the guy contacted me and he said, you saved me $36,000 and you didn't perform the procedure. And that was part of what we were going for, was to really start a price war and hold these price gouging, not-for-profit hospitals to task.
Now, this must have ruffled some feathers. You've clearly done it. You've clearly educated the end user as to the real-time costs, what the costs are and what they could be. 10 to 1 is a big number. Have you ruffled some feathers along the way? Have you received nasty emails?
That's the funniest line so far. Yes. That's an interesting question, though. Yes, we ruffled a lot of feathers. We were attacked by everybody you can imagine. But things began to change. I began, after starting to receive some media attention and notoriety, I began to receive requests from patients all over the United States for procedures and care that we could not perform at our outpatient surgery center. So if somebody had colon cancer, they had a pituitary brain tumor. And I decided one day I'm just going to pick up the phone and call a hospital administrator that I knew who did not hate me overtly and ask them, do you want access to a patient from Florida who has a pituitary tumor? Now, it's obviously someone they would never see. And I said, I can talk to the surgeon. I know how to talk to anesthesiologists. Will you give me facility pricing? Let's put something together because they would like to come to Oklahoma. And it worked. So now the tables have turned. The way it works is I work the pricing up, put a bundle together, the patients pay me, and then I buy those procedures from the same hospitals that tried to put us out of business early on. And so it's the power of the market, as Murray Rothbard would have said. So now we have all of these price gougers that have their toe in the water, and they've come kicking and screaming to the party. But this is spreading. This is spreading very rapidly. It's very exciting. I feel very vindicated, particularly when I can include my former real serious enemies, refer to them on my vendor list.
Can I ask you, Keith, because this is something I heard you, I've had you explain this before in other conversations with but I want our listeners here to get this. It was obvious once you spelled it out, but it kind of blew my mind at the time. How, so people have seen this. They'll get the invoice or whatever, itemized list from the explanation of benefits, I guess. From,
the menu?
After the thing. And it'll say the original price for something would be astronomical, insane for what it was, like, $10,000, insurance adjustment, $6,000, insurance coverage for, patient responsibility $2,000. And so you're thinking like, oh my gosh, it's a good thing I don't think I should have to pay $2,000 for what they just did. That doesn't seem normal, but right. Okay. I needed it or otherwise, I was in excruciating pain, fine. But they're looking like, it's a good thing I had that insurance because it's not just what they covered, but that adjustment where, if it weren't for them looking out for me, I would have gotten hit with a $20,000 bill. So can you just talk a little bit about like, what is that adjust where that's not the insurance company paying it, and they give this image like they're standing up for the little guy and really,
right.
Can you talk to that?
Yeah, and that was my 3 goals of launching the website was make ourselves more known to those who actually care and have sticker shock, start the price war, and the third goal was to better understand these scams that were at work because insurance companies hated us. I thought,
Yeah.
how is that possible? We're cheaper and we're better. Insurance companies collect premiums and they pay claims and they keep the difference and that's their profit, right? No, that's not all of it. And I've actually made a video called the $100 aspirin that walks people through this whole thing I'm about to say. But essentially, a not-for-profit hospital charges $100 for an aspirin, and they get paid $20 by Blue Cross, United, Cigna, Aetna. I hate them all. I don't have contracts with any of them, so I can say whatever I want. So they charge $100, they get paid $20, and you're right. As the end user, you think, wow, I'm glad I have insurance. They saved me $80. But how many aspirins can you buy at the corner drugstore for $20? Well, the hospital will claim that they lost $80 in that transaction because after all, they billed $100 and only got $20. And they use that $80 fictional loss to maintain the accounting fiction of their not-for-profit status. Furthermore, they put all of these fictitious losses in a bucket, mail it off to DC, where they are then the recipient of a kickback called disproportionate share hospital payments that is given to them to the extent that they claim these losses. And you and I both know they did not lose a dime receiving $20 for an aspirin. Well, the insurance companies play along with this scam because, like you said, they write in usually to a self-funded employer and say, look here, you got $100 bill or you got $100,000 bill. And we only paid them $20,000. We saved you $80,000. Well, and per the terms of our arrangement, you owe us a 28% commission on that savings that we achieved. So the insurance companies actually charge for this claims repricing, and that's what it's referred to as in the industry. But when you think through that, you realize the insurance company would much rather have received a $200,000 bill because their opportunity is double. So all of these prices are pre-negotiated. There are no discounts. This is all pre-negotiated. So the discounts that people see are fictitious, and it's not uncommon for an insurance CEO to ask a hospital, can you do a brother a favor and charge me more? And that way they maximize their take on the skim of selling discounts. So that's really how it works. And then there's another layer, the brokers and consultants with the big name firms out there. At the end of the year, they typically are paid a commission that's a percentage of claims. So you have brokers and consultants who want employers and patients to seek out the most expensive care because their commission at the end of the year is partly determined by how disastrous the experience was of an employer health plan. And I would argue that our launching our price list in 2009 began to rip the sheets off of this so people could actually see what was going on. The insurance companies still hate me. They don't want anything to do with me because of that opportunity foregone. They're not afforded a chance to reprice my claim because my price is my price and everyone can see it.
What an amazing description of value extraction. And I say that because founders and CEOs, when they're raising money or trying to sell something to an end user, are constantly asked, well, how are you adding value? I mean, and they have their spiel and they have their pitch. And what you're saying to me really makes me kind of think, well, how are you extracting value? Nothing's perfect. And the definition that you're giving, and we have a lot of founders and business type people kind of watching this from all walks of this podcast, from all walks of life. And that's the big message for me as a founder that I'm taking away, is to really take a really hard look at anything that I'm doing and ask myself, really, how am I? This is like the ultimate gross example of value extraction. Am I anywhere near this? And if I am, there's an opportunity to go and course correct this. I just had to throw that in. Question I have for you, Keith, is do you get queries from around the world? Do you get people from Canada, for example, where the healthcare system is so dramatically different and so socialized. And if I couldn't think of a more cloaked pricing structure, and potentially because of government intervention in a country like Canada, even potentially more corrupt, I mean, I'd be interested to hear, what Canadians are emailing you about.
Well, when I launched the website in 2009, the most shocking, the most astonishing thing was that Canadians were the first patients to arrive. And they would tell us, these stories about the length of the queue, as they say, the waiting line for this and that. The most common story was a woman who was tired of being transfused because of her terrible blood loss from a hysterectomy she was waiting in a 3-year wait line for. So they would pay $8,000 all in and end their nightmare and travel to Surgery Center of Oklahoma. So, yeah, Canadians were the first ones to arrive. Then we saw the Canadian business dry up, but that's because the facilities along the northern border that catered to them had to respond to my pricing. So when the pricing changed, then the Canadians didn't have to drive as far, which I thought was a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
At this point in time, the system in Canada is so dysfunctional that we are seeing a huge uptick in the number of Canadians showing up. The waiting lines that we're hearing that were 3 years, 2 years ago, are now 5 years. We operated on a guy who was a competitive rock climber, and he had a loose body in his ankle, and he needed an ankle arthroscopy, about a 20-minute procedure. They told him 5 years. He would have to wait 5 years. And he paid us $4,125, and we were finished in 20 minutes, and he got back to rock climbing and is doing great. We've operated on patients from all 50 states, Canada, England, France, Hungary, Turkey, Ethiopia, Nigeria, and I probably left something out. We have an Ethiopian patient coming next week for a hip replacement. So yes, people are coming from all over the world. I've made friends with others who are in this sort of medical tourism space, people that are at like Cayman Islands, medical city there. But our prices are about half theirs. They're a great outfit, but our prices are about half. There's some prices in Panama and Costa Rica that are very similar. But most people would rather stay in the United States if they don't have to go out of the country to secure care. But yeah, I mean, our reach is outside of the United States. We don't deal with any insurance carriers. We've never taken a dime of money from the government. Bob knows how I feel about that. I consider that accepting stolen property. So we've never accepted money from the government, have no insurance contracts, and all of the patients who pay us have the sticker shock that normal buyers have. And I would add one thing in response to your comment before your question. There are two economic models in this industry. One is the model, unfortunately, prevalent, that is meant to maximize revenue. How do I get every last drop of blood out of this turnip? The other model is, how do I maximize delivery of value? I'm a student of the Austrian school, and I teach all of my associates about the subjective theory of value and what that means, why it's important, why it really is important as a physician to understand that in dealing with patients, so that we can not just be their medical advocate, but also be their financial advocate and be more empathetic with them and try to understand what do they value and how did they come to that conclusion. So we're trying to make this value model spread, and I think we're having a lot of success.
So, Keith, if I want to try to have a little fun here, let me play devil's advocate for the benefit of some of the listeners who just think, like, on the one hand, what you're saying is good news, that, healthcare doesn't have to be as crazy as it seems. Like, but on the other hand, I can imagine some people not wanting to believe this, because then they feel like, are you telling me 99% of Americans are getting ripped off by a factor of 10? And so I could imagine that, them running through and saying, well, wait a minute. Is it that, like, you guys are just like grasping at the low hanging fruit, whereas these other institutions with whom you're competing they have to have like the big MRI machine. You know, I mean, there's a lot of fixed overhead that they couldn't all copy your model. And so you're kind of just like sniping at the edges, and it's not really an apples to apples comparison. Like, can you speak to someone who might be thinking like that?
Yeah, it's actually a different fruit. The phrase is cherry picking. The American Hospital Association has worked very hard to come up with phrases that the naysayers could use and questions like, well, what about the poor? Or you don't understand our overhead situation. Well, if I'm buying a car, I could give a rat's ass what the overhead problems of that car dealer are. Since when are the overhead issues of the seller the problem of the buyer? Right. And if you really want to know where their overhead is, look at their administrative staff. Look at their sponsoring of sports franchises. Look at their names on billboards. Look at them buying out competitors, buying physician practices. There are cranes in front of all of these broke, not-for-profit hospitals. They're struggling. Where do they get all this money? So, yeah, their overhead is insane. But, look at their administrative staff. Surgery Center of Oklahoma doesn't have an administrator. You're looking at him. And I have a full-time anesthesia practice. So, yeah, their overhead is insane. But again, it has to be insane in order to cover up how much money they're actually making. In order for them to maintain this not-for-profit fiction, then they have to point to all of this, insane spending they have. Now, on the rural side, rural hospitals struggle some, but they are victimized primarily by the big city big boys who come in, buy out the physician practices in town, and tell them to refer everything to the mothership in Mordor. So these huge hospitals, they work very hard on the regulatory side to ensure that industry consolidation is the result, and there are fewer and fewer independent hospitals out there. The model that we are a proponent of actually helps those small hospitals. They don't have the overhead concerns that some of these big hospitals have taken on, and so they're more nimble and they're more able to compete. There are examples all over the country where smaller hospitals have gotten into this game, and they realize, we can sharpen our pencil and perform colonoscopies for people who live in a big city like Miami or Atlanta who are willing to drive 45 minutes, get outside of town, and then we can do this for a sixth. I mean, think about that delta. If it's 10 to 1, you're really offering people a good deal at 6 to 1. So the spread there, the opportunity is really large. And I think a lot of smaller facilities historically victimized by these big city players are beginning to get in on that.
I would just encourage anyone listening to this to go ahead and Google the Surgery Center of Oklahoma. The first thing that comes up is the Surgery Center of Oklahoma, and then a dash, and then it says highest quality and cash pricing. So, Mike, one of the things that comes up, has anyone, and I'm just going to have a little bit of fun. Bob had some fun. I have to have some fun. Has anyone ever tried to pay you in Bitcoin or Tether or USDC? Yes.
Yeah, we've accepted Bitcoin and Litecoin. I've accepted gold and silver, and to some extent, as the seller, it's obligatory for me to accommodate the preferences of the buyer within reason, as long as it remains mutually beneficial. But yeah, we've accepted crypto, gold, silver. A lot of patients just bring cash. They'll bring their money in a paper sack and put it down and have a hip replacement and go home, and everything is paid for. They'll never get a bill afterwards.
Keith, I don't know if you have broken it down like this, but I can imagine some of the savings from just being a cash practice are that you don't have to, like, you actually get paid. So you know when the money's coming. Like, in other words, it's one thing to say, yeah, that'll be $2,000 cash or $8,000 with insurance and $3,000 patient responsibility, and the insurance, it takes a few months for you're arguing with them, and you have to have your own employees who do nothing but call insurance companies and hound patients until you finally send it over to a debt collector. So how much of it is just pure, the model's different versus like, well, no, actually to accept insurance, the actual cost does go up from the physician's point of view?
Yeah, it's probably 2080. There's definitely savings from not having an army of stormtroopers to deal with insurance companies. That's probably 20%. The rest of it is just ripoff. The rest of it is just margin that hospitals use to take over the world and increase their market share. That's their favorite saying. How do we increase our market share? But ironically, get paid fast, no hassles is how I am able to get a hospital CEO to answer the phone when I call them and say, hey, I've got a patient from Wisconsin. What's your price? Price is great. And the price is great because they know they're going to get paid what they say. They're not chasing the patient around the kitchen island to get a copay or deductible. They're going to be paid quickly. In some cases, if I don't have any credibility with them and they don't even know me, I pay them up front. I pay them before they even perform the procedure. So their AR is non-existent. And they don't have this revenue cycle management. They don't have any of that stuff where they're chasing money all the time. Here's what I do. Here is what I believe it's worth. Pay me that. And I hope that you think that that's mutually beneficial, and it works great.
Because, I think that's partly what drives this crazy process, because I had a child who had some health issues when he was younger, and then my wife had a lot of medical issues. And part of it is when you get a bill that's ridiculous, you say, well, you know what? I'm not going to pay that. And
That's right.
And then it's not like you can't get healthcare anymore. You know what I mean? Whereas if you just stop paying your electricity, they turn your power off. And so I think that's part of it. And that's why they can charge such crazy numbers, because we're all like, it's a game. It's kind of like, the joke in the Soviet Union, like they pretend to pay us and we pretend to work. Or maybe they said the vice versa. I might ruin the punchline. Right. But that everyone kind of knows these numbers are made up. This isn't real.
Well, it's like my partner in crime, Steve Lantier, who co-founded the facility with me. One time we were in a hostile crowd, and, their favorite question, the naysayers' favorite question is, what about the poor? And Steve Lantier, who is so quick-witted, said, what about the rich? They can't afford it either. The whole point is, let's fix this out on the margin, to begin with, and then hope that if the market discipline is allowed to work, the same thing will happen to our industry that happened to television sets. They get bigger, better, and cheaper. Yeah, and I'm here to tell you that's happening, and it's good news. It's a really good news story, and there are some journalists out there, and there's some people out there that have been very courageous to tell our story. Because there's a lot of big, bad people out there that don't want this known.
Do you find that, back to the founder, the employer, we understand that the most consistent part of an employer's day are the inconsistency of his or her staff. Payroll line item comes up every 2 weeks or twice a month, and it's a pain point for a lot of people responsible to make sure that they're getting their employees paid when they're calling in sick. They want to work from home. You have this love-hate relationship with your staff. You can't live with them. You can't live without them. I know that if I needed a medical procedure, I would want to be going into a facility where the staff were happy, they were upbeat, that were happy to come to work. I don't know much about your model. I'm learning a lot about it right now, but it seems like the kind of model that's lending itself to creating a better workplace morale, knowing that they're in the back of their mind that they're doing something auspicious, something favorable. They're on the margin, these are smart people. These are doctors. These are nurses. These are educated people that can know the game that's being played around them. Like, do you see that? Is your team and your staff and your affiliates, are they happier? Are they better doctors because of it?
Yeah, all smiles at my place. We've been open 26 years next month, and I have original employees that are still with me who would never work anywhere else. It's just a great environment. And part of the reason is what is not present at Surgery Center of Oklahoma. It's kind of what is not seen. We don't have any insurance contracts. So our waiting room is empty if we're not really good at what we do. Our waiting room is empty if we are not kind and responsive to patients. Every person on my staff knows that. So we are busy, we are successful if we are really good at what we do, and everyone there is happy. and the patients are happy there. The employers who send their employees to Surgery Center of Oklahoma incentivize them by waiving all out-of-pocket and all copay. They pay all their travel for them and a companion. This 10-to-1 spread makes that possible. At the Surgery Center of Oklahoma, we're self-funded. I pay all the bills for our employees, all their medical bills out of operational revenue. The employees contribute nothing to our health plan. Nothing comes out of their paycheck, and they have no out-of-pocket and no deductible for any kind of procedural stuff that they need. I encourage them to sign up for a direct primary care membership. That's a concierge medicine where they pay $90 a month or $70 a month and have unlimited access to a primary care doctor. And I pay for that. I pay for every dime of that. So this is that situation where the human resource person has to really struggle with, this is great for a company, and this is also great for the employees. Most of the time, HR is in a position where anything they recommend that's good for the company, the employees assume they're getting killed. They're getting fleeced somehow. And if HR recommends something that's great for the employees, then the board has an emergency meeting and, to replace HR because they're trying to bankrupt us. This is that deal where an employer in a very short time realizes our health plan spend just went down 80%, and the employees had no out-of-pocket, and they could not be happier. Oh, and by the way, we can now recruit better because we offer this no out-of-pocket option, and the company is saving money compared to anything Blue, United, Cigna, Aetna, or some big broker could sell the company. So everybody has smiles on their face. We have a contract with Oklahoma County. It's the largest county in the state of Oklahoma, and it's all of the Oklahoma County employees. These are not highly compensated individuals by anyone's definition, but their deductibles are waived. These deductibles have now become so high in order to protect health plan assets that they represent a real barrier to care. So every Christmas, unfailing, every Christmas, some family comes in and says, this year we are going to have little Junior's tonsils taken out, and we are going to have Christmas. In prior years, we had to make a choice. And so those people are now loyal to their employer. They're not going anywhere. And when you offer benefits like this that also benefit the company, it's win-win all the way around. The only losers are the bad guys. The only losers are the price gougers who lost out on this because they're busted.
Keith, so how does that work? I mean, is that just an option then for employers who happen to be within 15 minutes of where you're physically located?
Yeah, no, we have employer contracts in all 50 states.
So can you just explain that a little bit? Like, so how does that, so an employer in Florida, how does he benefit from your model?
Well, they'll have an employee that has, a gallbladder that needs to be removed or needs a knee replacement. And they will go directly to me, or they will go to their third-party administrator, whoever holds the checkbook for their self-funded health plan. And they'll say, we really don't want to pay $200,000 for a knee replacement like we did last month. We've heard about this surgery center. Can we deal with them? Oh, and, I think we'll just fly our employee out there with a companion, pay everything, give them per diem expenses. What do you think? Next thing I know, we have an arrangement with them, and patient comes out, we operate on them, they go back home, and at the water cooler, they tell everyone about their experience, which is so astonishing. No one can actually believe it. And then another employee comes out, and the next thing you know, it's just off to the races. And then the word spreads, and then they tell their friends, and this employer may actually be able to hire people they otherwise would not have had access to because of this benefit. And employers tend not to keep us a secret. They will tell even their competitors about what we're doing. And keep in mind, Bob, I started this in 2009, so we're in year 17. And at employer conferences, at human resource conferences, people have talked about this long enough now that it's very, very common for me to have an agreement with an employer in North Carolina, another one in California, Wisconsin, Florida, I mean, everywhere. And they will pay the travel expenses for the employee and a companion. Same thing with the cost sharing ministries. They're trying to get everybody to us that they possibly can.
Well, it's funny because as you were going through that, I realized that, yeah, if you're talking about like bills above 100,000 to fly someone across the country for a couple days and put them up, that's not a big deal. Like if you're saving that kind of money.
Bob, we've had employers in Idaho that sent a patient to us for their carpal tunnel surgery, which is nothing. But they've done that not just because the savings basically justifies it, but they've done that because they've worked with us before and they know it's going to go well. They know it's going to go well the first time. They know there's not going to be a second time that it needs to be done. So for quality reasons, people are initially attracted to the price. That gets their attention because they realize, my gosh, I think I can afford this. But they come back for the quality. Anybody that's been at our place that goes to another facility, at least one that doesn't copy our model, they see the difference immediately. They're treated like cattle and like a number.
Yeah. I mean, I would even take it one step further where they see the price is attractive. The quality of the service is good, but now they have a story to tell. Now, to your point, when they go back to the water cooler and they learn about the origination of your organization, they have a story to tell. They have something with, hey, I went and how was the surgery, Jim or Jane? Oh, it was great, but I went to this really cool surgical center and I learned a little bit about their economic model. And now that person looks really interesting. And that's because of your story. That's very powerful. And you must have since 2009 created a community around your story. And people probably, I'm assuming, and tell me if I'm right or wrong, but there must be employers sending employees for the price, for the product. They're probably sending it there for the story because they maybe are libertarian or they're Austrian and they just believe it. Maybe they're a capitalist and they just must believe that this is the right thing to do, maybe ethically or morally or economically.
And
do you have that community?
Yeah, we really do. And psychologically, no one wants to enable a robbery. No one actually wants to be an accomplice or an accessory. No one wants to have a carpal tunnel surgery in Idaho and pay $12,000 for it, or even have their employer pay $12,000 when they know it's $2,750 in Oklahoma City, all expenses paid. So there's something psychologically where people, they don't want to be part of a ripoff. And Bob knows firsthand, there's a national association that has placed its umbrella, and I'm co-founder of it, over this movement. It's the Free Market Medical Association, and Bob has spoken there. It's a great organization. Our meeting is actually this coming week in Kansas City, and for the first time, it's sold out. Our keynote speaker is Peter Klein, and he's going to talk to us about entrepreneurialism, and they're going to get it from the horse's mouth. It's very exciting. We've had Ron Paul keynote. It's just become a very exciting movement. I feel vindicated because everybody acknowledges, it started in Oklahoma City and it's just blown up all over the country. Next year this is incredible. Next year will be our 10th year. So time flies. The Free Market Medical Association is a very Austrian organization, and next year we'll be back in Oklahoma City. We decided we were going to do year 10 back where it started and hope it sells out as well. Buy your tickets early.
Yeah, well, for folks listening, at the show notes page, I'll put links to like the $100 aspirin video you mentioned and links to the Free Market Medical Association. And of course, to the Surgery Center of Oklahoma for people who want to learn more. It was fun. Yeah, when you said that, Keith, the event that I spoke at, because I've been to a lot of libertarian events where I don't want to be too stereotypical, but like people who are angry at the system just getting up and yelling and stuff. And like, they're sort of on the fringes Whereas here, it was like established surgeons and employers getting up, people with some clout in their communities explaining, like, yep, this totally works. It wasn't like some theoretical, we can imagine one day in the future a society that functions along these lines. It was like, nope, this is what we did last year. This is how much money we saved. It was pretty compelling. Like it was very real.
And keep in mind too, for those of us who would like to see a more market-oriented world, a more Austrian view, if we can demonstrate in a real way with multiple laboratories all over the United States that market discipline works in the medical industry, no other industry has a chance, I think, of making the case that the market does not apply to them. So I get real excited when I see competitors pop up and I see that their pricing is very close to mine, and we remain very collegial and friendly. But we are showing, I believe, that contrary to what many of the naysayers would like for folks to believe, that market discipline applies in the medical industry. And my gosh, if we really can demonstrate that and have any degree of acceptance, then to what industry does market discipline not apply? Where do people go to hide if we can show that it works in our industry? And I think we're doing that.
Well, I was going to ask you that, like, did you ever consider like setting up franchises, or do people in other cities contact you for advice and they want to copy your model?
Yeah, people ask for my advice. I spent this morning with an outfit from Salt Lake City who wants to copy us. I've never been a big fan of franchising because if I did, then I would be that silent partner. I would be that extra mouth to feed that would render that facility less competitive than it otherwise would be without me, the parasite, involved. So I encourage people to go to a bank, borrow what you need, get going, pay them off. They're an ad hoc sort of capital partner. And then you can compete with Surgery Center of Oklahoma. But if I'm involved or there's some other franchise, I need a return on my investment sort of component, then the prices are just not going to be what they could be. Now, granted, the spread is insane. And so that opportunity is there. But that's why I haven't done it. I prefer to see the movement grow. I tell people I'm a capitalist and I want to make money. But when it comes to seeing this movement grow, I'm very missional. And I help people all the time figure out how to copy what we've done.
Right. So that's interesting. You say, okay, go to a bank. I mean, that's a good option. I get the analogy. You go into business with the bank instead of you describe the parasite. I mean, I get it. This seems like very bankable. This seems like something from a venture capital perspective that is very interesting. Are there venture capital groups out there that are looking to lend against this model? I mean,
yes.
I am one. This seems really interesting.
Yeah, there are. And when the call's over, I'll introduce you to some people who are doing that if you're interested. But yes, this definitely has the attention of the venture capital world because of the spread. Because the spread is so crazy that they can actually get in there and mix it up, make a good return, and really not get into that arena of price gouging, not even get close. So yeah, that's part of the reason I think the movement is growing.
Because I mean, given the structure, it does make sense to get people on planes. But on the other hand, it's kind of crazy if people are getting on planes and flying to you to get what are pretty routine procedures. Like, why don't they just set up a copycat organization in Miami that does the same kind of thing?
That's right. And the federal government, as usual, is to blame for everything. And the reason that's not happening is the federal government. So federal government inflicted these certificate of need laws all over the country on the federal level. And then when they realized what a disaster it was and they got such pushback, they stepped back and said, well, if you don't like it at the state level, you can just repeal them. Well, not every state has repealed them. Some of them have to varying degrees, but There are a lot of states in the United States that still have the requirement that anybody that wants to create the Surgery Center of North Carolina has to appear before a star chamber of their future competitors who get to decide whether they get to open. And, well, most of the time, it's thumbs down. In fact, every time, it's thumbs down. So those certificate of need laws are out there, and that's one reason you're not seeing Surgery Center of Oklahoma's pop up in every state in the United States.
You want to ask one final question for our guest, Cole?
Sure, I would love to. And I am just, you have me spinning right now with excitement. I mean, I see why I was our CFO of our company that was so excited that you were on. And, we were into technology, and, technology is a big piece. So I guess my final question would be anything around technology that you're excited about, that you see that you're currently implementing in your business, or you mentioned that you would receive Bitcoin as a model of payment. We're always excited about blockchain technology. Anything that you're doing that you're excited about or that you see coming?
I'm not anti-tech, but I'm very old school. I still have a full-time anesthesia practice. I still see one patient at a time. We do not have electronic medical records at Surgery Center of Oklahoma. We don't have data breaches, though, because patients' information is not digitalized and easy to steal. So what's missing is market discipline. There are a lot of people that believe you can apply tech solutions and make it all better, but that's about managing the current cesspool better. The real answer is to walk away, is to secede, is to join or create an alternative. There is no fixing the current system. The only answer, I believe, is an alternative. And that's not a tech solution. That is just a roll up your sleeves, basic, here is what I do, here is what I charge for it, market, judge me. And that's radical. That is much, much more radical than any tech. I think that if a medical business wants to accept crypto, they ought to do it. We've done it. I didn't want to lose those cases, and those buyers clearly wanted to stay off the grid and pay us in Bitcoin. And I got to learn about how, I opened a Coinbase wallet, and I got to learn a lot in the process. I told someone last night that after I opened my Coinbase wallet and accepted that payment, I actually felt younger than I did the week before. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I'm not opposed to tech solutions, but the solution to what ails us is getting the government out of this business, introducing market discipline, and making sure everybody competes with one another and endures the same sort of market discipline every other industry has to put up with.
Very wise words. I think that applies not just to healthcare, but across the board. That sort of mentality. Well, folks, our guest this week has been Dr. Keith Smith, it's a cliche, but this is one man who's making a difference. And so all seriousness aside, Keith, thank you so much for what you're doing. And I know our listeners got a lot out of this episode. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me. Good to meet you.
This concludes another episode of the Founders Forum. The information provided is for educational purposes and does not constitute financial advice. Consult with qualified professionals before making any financial or investment decisions. For more information on the hosts and for previous episodes, visit foundersforum.io. Thanks for listening.